My cousin bragged about copying my artwork for an online contest, so I filed a copyright strike before the finals, and he got disqualified mid-live stream. I grew up in a family where talent was more about bragging rights than actual appreciation. My aunt, in particular, had this habit of turning everything into a competition. If your kid made the honor roll, hers got into Mensa. If you painted something, her son painted the Mona Lisa blindfolded. That sort of toxic comparison. I'm not the type to shove my wins in people's faces. I draw because it's my way of processing the world. Art kept me grounded through some of the worst years of my life, especially high school, when I was dealing with a mix of depression, social anxiety, and, let's be honest, being the quiet, weird kid with a sketch pad in a corner. My cousin Derek was the golden boy. Football captain, straight teeth, charming as hell, and completely full of himself. We were close in age, but worlds apart in personality. Still, our families liked to force us together. Every holiday, birthday, reunion, we were paired off like some warped version of sibling rivalry. The thing is, Derek was always just a little too interested in what I was working on. He'd hover when I drew. He'd ask questions, take pictures of my sketchbook for inspiration, and once even asked if he could borrow one of my characters for a school project. I said no. He used it anyway. Claimed he'd just been influenced. That should have been my first red flag. Fast forward to last year. I'd been working hard building an online portfolio. I wasn't some TikTok sensation or anything, but I had a decent following on ArtStation and Instagram. People liked my stuff. I was even taking commissions here and there. That's when I heard about the Neoverse digital art contest. It was a pretty big deal, sponsored by an indie gaming company, cash prizes, and a shot at freelance contracts for character design. The kind of opportunity I'd been dreaming about. I poured my soul into that entry. I spent weeks sketching, refining, reworking details. I created an original humanoid mechanical hybrid character, rooted in West Coast cyberpunk vibes, lots of neon, graffiti textures, half-droid anatomy with emotional depth. It wasn't just a drawing, it had a whole story behind it. I submitted it a day before the deadline and didn't tell anyone, not even my friends. It felt too important, too fragile to talk about until it was real. A few weeks later, the top 10 finalists were announced. I wasn't on the list. At first, I was crushed. I went back to the site, hoping maybe I'd missed my name, but there it was. A finalist named Dex Renditions, with an entry that looked uncomfortably familiar. As in, it was my character. Same body proportions, same weapon design, even the same asymmetrical graffiti tag I'd invented. Just slightly altered colors and mirrored composition. Like someone had taken my art, flipped it, and changed enough to make it different to a casual viewer. And then I saw the video interview Neoverse had posted with the finalists, and there was Derek, my cousin, using a fake handle, trying to pitch my concept like it was his, talking about the inspiration behind the design and years of building his portfolio. I don't remember much of the next 10 minutes. I just sat at my desk, staring at the screen, heartbeat in my ears. The betrayal wasn't just about art. It was about everything. All the years he'd smirked while flipping through my sketchbooks, pretending to compliment me. All the forced comparisons from our family. All the times I'd felt like maybe, just maybe, I was finally gaining confidence. Only to have someone like him sweep in and profit off my vulnerability. I didn't yell. I didn't call him. I just opened a folder on my desktop and started compiling evidence. Timestamped PSD files. Instagram posts from months ago featuring my character's development. Screenshots of conversations where I discussed the design process. Even sketches from back when the idea was just a scribble in a journal. I watermarked everything and filed a copyright report with Neoverse legal team. Then I waited. A week later, I got an email. They were investigating. Derek was still scheduled to present his piece during the final live stream the following weekend. The top 3 would be announced live, in front of a few thousand viewers on Twitch and YouTube. The prize? $50,000 and a contract offer. I wasn't sure what to expect. I'd done the right thing, but I wasn't sure the right thing would matter. But on the day of the stream, I watched in real time as karma clocked in. Derek showed up on screen, smiling, full of fake humility, wearing some knockoff, creative genius persona. And just as the host said, "Let's take a final look at Derek's entry," the screen glitched. Then cut. Then the host reappeared, looking awkward as hell. "We've just received confirmation of a copyright violation involving one of our finalist submissions. Due to a breach of the contest's originality guidelines, The following artist has been disqualified. Dex renditions. The chat exploded. Derek's feed vanished. My inbox lit up. Part of me expected him to message me, apologize, maybe even try to spin it. Instead, silence. Just like that time he borrowed my character in high school. Just like every time he got caught and ghosted the consequences. But this time, the world saw. And I wasn't done yet. The moment Derek's name disappeared from the screen, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Justice. Not revenge. Not satisfaction. Just balance. Like the scales had finally tilted back toward fairness, even for a second. But the silence that followed wasn't comforting. I didn't hear from him. Not that day. Not the day after. Not even a half-hearted, "you misunderstood" text. He went dark on social media too, deleted his Instagram, locked his Twitter. The guy who used to post shirtless gym selfies and motivational quotes about hustle culture every morning just vanished. I'd be lying if I said I didn't check his pages more than once. I wasn't obsessed, but I was angry. And not just at him. At how easy it had been for him to nearly walk away with something I built. How he'd probably done this before, in smaller ways, and gotten away with it because no one pushed back. Because people like me usually don't. And because in our family, the loud ones always got believed first. It was my mom who broke the silence. She called a few days after the live stream, voice tight with tension. "Did you do something to Derek?" That question alone told me everything I needed to know about where her loyalty still stood. I could have said so many things. But instead, I just told the truth. He stole my work. I reported it. Neoverse investigated. They agreed. There was a long pause on her end. Then came the sigh. The infamous sigh I knew too well, the one reserved for when I was being too sensitive or too reactive. "You know how competitive he is," she said, as if that explained anything. "And he's having a hard time right now. You really couldn't just let this one slide?" Let it slide? I felt my pulse spike. I closed my eyes, counted to 5 like my therapist taught me, and asked as calmly as I could, "Would you be saying that if I'd done the same thing to him?" More silence. We didn't talk much after that. Turns out Derek was going through it. He dropped out of a design boot camp halfway through, claiming it was too basic for his level. He didn't have a portfolio. He'd been job hopping through internships his dad arranged, none lasting more than a month. Now, the Neoverse fallout was all over Reddit and a few niche art communities. His handle had been flagged on multiple platforms for plagiarism. He was toxic, and he knew it, which made what happened next all the more ironic. I got a DM 2 weeks later from a burner account. No profile picture, just a single message. "You ruined my life over some drawing. Hope it was worth it." No name. No proof. But I knew it was him. The phrase, "some drawing," was a dead giveaway. Derek had always minimized what I did. When we were kids, he'd call it doodling. In high school, it became weird anime stuff. At Thanksgiving, he once joked in front of my entire extended family that I was basically unemployed with a sketch pad. I didn't reply. I screenshotted it, blocked the account, and moved on. Or tried to. Because a week after that, he showed up to a family barbecue. I wasn't planning on going. But my cousin Talia, one of the only relatives who actually respected me, convinced me. "It'll be chill," she said. "He probably won't even come." He did. And the second he saw me, his jaw clenched. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. His eyes had that dull shine of someone still in denial. And instead of avoiding me like I thought he would, he marched right up. "You think you're some big shot now?" he asked, voice low but sharp. "Because you got me kicked out of a dumb contest?" I sipped my drink. "You kicked yourself out. I just showed them the truth." He scoffed. "You think anyone cares? You think you're going to be famous or something now?" I shrugged. "Don't need to be. I just need to be better than you." Which, well, doesn't take much. That stung. I saw it land. And I almost felt bad. Almost. He stormed off. Our aunt tried to do damage control later, telling everyone that I'd misunderstood the situation, that Derek had just been inspired by my art, that it was all one big coincidence. But by then, most of the family knew. Talia had screenshotted the contest page and the disqualification message and sent it around the family group chat like a wildfire. The tide was turning, quietly, subtly, but definitely turning. It wasn't about fame. It wasn't even about revenge, really. It was about being seen. All those years, I've been invisible in that family. The weird kid. The introvert. The one who didn't want to play flag football with the cousins or talk stocks with the uncles. I was always off to the side, drawing something no one cared about. But now they knew. Now they had to. What came next wasn't planned, but it felt like the universe nudged it into motion. A few days after the barbecue, I got an email. Not spam, not a scam. A real message from a small indie game studio based out of Seattle. One of their developers had been watching the Neoverse contest livestream. They saw my name in the copyright credits, tracked down my portfolio, wanted to talk. They weren't promising anything, but they were intrigued. I stared at the screen for 5 full minutes before I even moved. Something was shifting, and I wasn't about to let anyone steal that again. The studio from Seattle set up a video call. I spent the morning obsessively rearranging the prints on the wall behind my desk, trying to look like someone who belonged in a creative meeting, not like the kid who was told his art was just a phase, or that he'd grow out of it once life got real. The call lasted 35 minutes. They weren't overly corporate or intimidating, just real people who loved storytelling and wanted to know where my head was at. They'd seen my Neoverse entries, the original ones, and asked how long I'd been working in digital illustration. When I told them I was mostly self-taught and freelance between a few agencies and commissions, they nodded like it made total sense. They didn't ask about the plagiarism scandal, but I brought it up anyway. I know you probably heard about what happened with Derek, I said near the end. I just want to be clear. I never wanted drama. I just wanted credit for what I built. Their lead art director gave me this soft smile. Good. That's what a real creator does. A week later, they offered me a short-term contract. Just one character design concept pack, part of a bigger game pitch they were developing. It wasn't flashy, but it was something. Real money. Real respect. I took it, obviously. And for the first time in my life, I didn't second-guess whether I was good enough. I knew I was. Back home, word had spread. Derek wasn't invited to Thanksgiving that year. My aunt claimed he was too busy with work, but everyone knew that was code for still embarrassed. At one point, I caught my uncle, the same one who once told me I'd be homeless with a tablet, peeking over my shoulder while I worked on a concept sketch on my iPad. He didn't say anything, just walked away. It was the quietest compliment I'd ever gotten. By January, the Seattle team asked if I'd be open to doing another round of work, something more polished. My designs had helped them land funding for their beta, and they wanted consistency in their style. I asked for a modest rate increase. They agreed without blinking. That night, I sat on the roof of my apartment with a cup of ramen and stared at the skyline. I remembered the first time I'd shown Derek one of my drawings. We were kids, maybe 12. I'd spent hours working on this intricate sketch of a dragon wrapped around a crumbling skyscraper. I thought it looked badass. Derek laughed and said, "Cool doodle. You gonna draw comics in the school paper?" Back then, that cut deep. Now, I was building worlds people wanted to pay for. Still, I didn't expect to hear from him again. Not directly. But then came the text. A month after the new contract started, Derek messaged me out of nowhere. No preamble. Just, "You think you're better than me now?" I stared at it for a while. The old me would have typed out a long, careful response. Try to smooth things over, diffuse tension, make peace. The new me didn't know him that. So I responded, "I don't think I'm better than you. I just am. You proved it." I expected him to go off. But he didn't. He just left me on read, for weeks. And then, like some twisted epilogue, I found out what had really happened on his end. Turns out, after he got booted from Neoverse, Derek tried to pivot. Rebranded himself as a creative consultant, started offering overpriced portfolio reviews online, claimed he was an expert in visual storytelling. But people talk. Screenshots get passed around. The community may be big, but it's not that big. The story caught up with him. He tanked a couple of collaborations by ghosting deadlines. Got flamed on Twitter for recycling the same 3 pieces across different platforms. And when a mid-sized YouTube artist exposed him for giving feedback that was copy-pasted from a Reddit post, that was it. His name was Mud. Meanwhile, my life was getting louder in the best way. The Seattle game got greenlit for early release, and I was asked to stay on as a recurring freelancer. My name ended up in the credits. Not hidden, not buried, not misspelled. Just there, like it belonged. I even got a DM from one of the Neoverse judges. "Just wanted to say, I'm glad you said something. We're trying to build a platform that protects artists, and your case helped us push some internal changes." That message meant more than any prize money ever could. But the full circle moment? That came in March. Neoverse announced a new panel for their spring event. Guest speakers. I was one of them. Topic: Digital Integrity and the Future of Original Content. I laughed out loud when I read the invite. Thought it was a prank, but it wasn't. They flew me out to New York, put me up in a decent hotel, and gave me a time slot right after an AI ethics panel. I stood in front of a crowd of maybe 200 artists, developers, and students, and told them the story, my story. Not just the drama, but the years of doubt, the freelance grind, the moment I almost walked away from art entirely, and how the worst betrayal I'd ever experienced became the thing that pushed me forward. I ended my talk with the same sentence I'd typed to Derek that night. I don't think I'm better than him. I just am. And I earned that. They clapped. Some people even stood up. Afterwards, someone asked if I'd ever forgive Derek. I told them maybe, but he'd have to do the work. And based on everything I'd seen, he never would. It's funny how people assume revenge is this big, movie-like moment. A mic drop, an explosion, a scene with gasps and slow claps. But the real thing? It's quieter. It's sitting at your desk, coffee half cold, reading an email that says, "We'd like to feature your work on the cover," and realizing no one had to be burned to make you feel warm. You just had to win. The offer came from a well-known art magazine. They'd seen my game concept work through Neoverse and wanted to highlight new digital artists shaping the indie space. I remember reading the email 3 times before it sank in. My name, on the cover. My art, front and center. No asterisk. No stolen credit. Just mine. I called my mom first. She answered on the third ring, probably expecting a quick check-in. "Hey," I said, trying to sound normal. "Remember when I used to draw on the back of cereal boxes?" She laughed. "You mean when I had to keep buying cereal just to get more canvases?" "Well," I said, "someone wants to put one of those drawings on a magazine cover." She didn't get it at first, but when she realized I was serious, I swear I heard her tear up. That was the moment I'd been chasing, more than anyone over Derek, making the people who always believed in me proud. My dad wasn't a huge talker, but when I told him, he just said, "Told you your cousin was a punk." And that was his version of "I'm proud." The shoot for the cover was surreal. I flew out to LA, met the editorial team, and stood in front of a white backdrop while a photographer told me to look creative but not too intense. I ended up just laughing halfway through, and that's the shot they used. Me, in my beat-up Vans and hoodie, smiling like I just remembered a really good joke. The joke, of course, was that people used to say this career wasn't real. Now I had the receipts. Around this time, Derek had gone radio silent online. His once booming Instagram had dropped to barely any activity. Rumor had it he moved back in with his parents after burning too many bridges. Someone even said he was applying for non-art jobs, like marketing assistant stuff. I didn't dig too deep. I didn't need to. But fate wasn't done twisting the knife. One day, I got an email from an event coordinator for a mid-sized design conference in Chicago. They were looking for a workshop leader on protecting creative integrity in the digital age and said someone from Neoverse had recommended me. Apparently, my story had started floating around in a few industry Slack channels. I said yes. The conference wasn't massive, but it had weight. Think, indie designers, developers, marketing reps from big studios sniffing around for talent. I walked in with my sketchbook, wearing the same hoodie I'd worn for the Neoverse livestream. My armor, I guess. I was halfway through my workshop, breaking down how I'd filed the copyright claim and what other artists should know about protecting their work, when someone in the back raised their hand. The guy looked familiar, even though he was trying hard not to be. Derek. I had no idea he'd be there. My stomach dropped for a second. Not out of fear, just surprise. He didn't ask a question. He just looked at me, eyes a little hollow, face drawn. The guy who used to strut like he owned every room he entered now looked like someone who couldn't find the door. I kept going. I didn't call him out. Didn't give him the attention he clearly wanted. I just finished the session, answered questions, and thanked everyone. Afterward, while I was packing up, Derek approached me. He didn't even say hi. He just said, "You didn't have to do all this. You could have talked to me." I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the boy who once told me I'd never make it unless I started drawing things people actually wanted. The guy who used my work and called it a collaborative vibe. The man who mocked me behind my back but still kept my art on his mood board. So I said, "You could have apologized. You could have admitted what you did before I had to make it public." He looked away. I was under pressure. My dad wanted me to prove I could do something. Anything. I nodded. And I wasn't supposed to matter, right? I was just the cousin you borrowed from. He didn't respond. I could have dragged him. I could have made a scene, told every person in that hall who he really was. But I didn't. because the truth was already louder than anything I could say. I left him standing there, walked out into the Chicago wind, my sketchbook under my arm, my name already listed for 2 more speaking events and a potential panel at Comic-Con. The win wasn't in humiliating him. It was in living a life he could no longer fake his way into. Later that night, I got a DM from another attendee. Derek just left the after-party early. Looked like someone who realized his story ended a while ago. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my laptop and started sketching again. Not for a contest, or a client, or revenge. Just for me. Because that's the biggest win of all. I got to keep creating. It's been a little over a year since that day in Chicago. I remember coming home, dropping my bag, and just sitting there in silence for a while. Not because I was overwhelmed, but because I finally felt empty in a good way. Like all the noise, the anger, the hurt, the need to prove something had finally burned itself out. Derek faded out of the scene, mostly. A few old classmates told me he tried launching a new art page under a different handle, but it didn't go anywhere. People didn't trust him. He hadn't just burned bridges, he'd napalmed his own reputation. And in an industry where credibility is currency, he was broke. Meanwhile, I kept working. I signed a contract with an indie game studio that loved my concept art from the Neoverse submission. The lead dev told me straight up, "You have an eye for emotion in design, and it's obvious this work is yours." That matters. I never mentioned Derek. Didn't need to. My portfolio did all the talking. My online following grew. Not fast, not viral, just steady. Organic. People resonated with the work. I get messages from kids saying they'd never seen someone draw grief the way I did. Or that they started sketching again after months of burnout because one of my posts reminded them of why they started. Those hit harder than any commission check. And yeah, money got better. I wasn't living in some LA loft or anything, but I could afford groceries without stressing over price tags. I even moved out of the cramped apartment I used to share with 3 other art grads and into a small studio space downtown. The kind of place with big windows and good light. The kind of place I dreamed of when I was doodling on napkins during my barista shifts. There was one moment that kind of tied the bow on everything. My mom sent me a package. No note, just a wrapped frame. When I opened it, it was a printed screenshot of the Neoverse moment. Derek being disqualified live. The stunned reaction, my art replacing his on-screen. At first, I was kind of horrified. Like, "Mom, why would you frame that?" But then I noticed something else. Beneath it, she taped a note in her handwriting. "You didn't need this to prove anything to us. But I know it helped prove it to yourself. Hang it not to gloat, but to remember what you climbed out of." So I did. I hung it in my studio, next to a canvas I'd painted just for myself. No client. No deadline. Just a midnight blue swirl of motion and light. Something abstract and emotional. I called it Unclaimed Victories. Because sometimes, the best wins don't come with applause. A few months later, I got an email from my high school. They were organizing an alumni speaker event and asked if I'd come talk about creative careers and perseverance. At first, I laughed. The same school where Derek used to be the golden boy, and I was the kid who doodled too much during math? But then I said yes. When I walked into that auditorium, I saw a few of my old teachers. Some recognized me right away. Others took a second. But when I started speaking, talking about how creativity isn't linear, how sometimes the most validating moments come from the deepest betrayals, they leaned in. I didn't name Derek. I didn't have to. The story stood on its own. At the end, a girl came up to me, maybe 16 or 17, clenching a sketch pad like it was armor. She said, "I always thought I was wasting my time drawing. My cousin says I'll never make it. But you made me feel like maybe I will." And I just smiled and said, "Start by drawing for yourself." That's where all of this started. When I got home, I saw a message in my inbox. It was from Derek. I hovered over it for a while. Just the name alone made my pulse spike. But I clicked it open anyway. Curiosity is a powerful drug. I've been thinking a lot. I know it's too late to fix things. But I wanted to say, you were right. About everything. I was scared you'd outgrow me. And you did. I hope someday people forget what I did. But I know I won't. I just wanted you to know that. I didn't respond. I didn't block him either. Some ghosts deserve to fade, not be exorcised. The last time I mentioned Derek publicly was in a caption under a photo of my studio window at Golden Hour. It just said, "Some stories end without an audience." That's okay. Not everything needs a curtain call. Now, when I paint, I do it with quiet hands and a clear mind. I don't hear his voice anymore when I create. just my own. And it's enough. Because in the end, he gave me a gift. Not the pain, not the betrayal, but the fire. The reason to keep going, keep creating, keep proving, not to him, but to myself, that I had something worth saying. He gave me my story. I gave myself the ending.